Okay, so this is the Agoda repository that you can clone on your machine and then run those commands. Yeah, I'll let you clone it and just do the yarn install. Otherwise, it's just npm install if you want to stick with npm. Does anyone has a problem to download or to clone the repository? The Wi-Fi here, for people that didn't see it yet, like the Wi-Fi name is agoda_visitor, and the password is agoda.com, in case you need it. Everybody is there? Okay, and then on the command line you can root to the folder, the root of that folder, and run yarn install. Any issues with the npm package update? Over. Whoa. Any difficulty? Can I continue? Yeah? Okay, then let's move on. You will have a few minutes, don't worry, to catch up if there is some command issues. Then you can open Visual Studio Code. I'm recommending Visual Studio Code not because it's the best tool, like there might be better tool, like it's depend on each other, but this tutorial of this workshop is mostly using terms or the method that we use in Visual Studio. If you Visual Studio Code, if you have Visual Studio or other IDE, you will need to kind of extrapolate to have the same functionality, or you might need some plugins. So open Visual Studio Code and open the project as I did earlier to get the code in your IDE, which should be this one. And in the plugins, you might need to install some TypeScript function plugin if you don't have it. But once you open the project, it will show you, it should tell you that you need to install it. Let me go to index. So once you go there, if you do Control, Shift, and B, it should compile. I mean, it should run the compile command. You might see a menu asking you to select which run command or which build command. It's going to show Webpack. Now, the build will fail, in theory. Otherwise, I push too much answers. But if everything is fine, you should get some errors similar to that, and that is okay, because the purpose of a workshop is actually to fix this thing by using the few things we have seen earlier. Okay, it might be a little bit small here, but basically it's going to complain about the error handler. Is everybody there? I'm sorry?
Using Atom.
Oh, okay.
So I need to know what is the application name.
You would need to use a command line to the root of the folder. So if you browse open a terminal, yeah, in case you have different tools, open a terminal at the root. Okay, and then you can type yarn space run space webpack, and it will run this compilation. Actually, that's what I did in that screenshot. yarn space run space webpack. We are building this project using Webpack. Is anyone familiar with Webpack, or actually not familiar with Webpack?
No, but it's working.
Yeah, it's working. You get the error.
Yeah.
Splendid. Okay, so let's move on. So you remember the code I was showing earlier and I mentioned wasn't there. It's because basically the purpose of a workshop is to recreate that. We are going to create the car, we are going to create the iVehicle interface, we are going to create the supercar. So here you can create a new file in the folder source/course/cars.ts. You can create a file there. And create an interface into that file as an interface named iVehicle that contains two functions, two methods, start and stop. So I'm going to do it as we go. So in course here, that's a little bit small, but I don't think I can zoom more in the view. I can, cool. So let's close this one. So we want in the folder course to create a new file, car.ts, and we want to create an interface. So what are the keywords and terms we need to use to create an interface? Exactly. And then we create the two methods. We declare the two methods for this interface, start and stop. In an interface, you will not provide, we cannot provide a modifier. So it's not like public or private or any other modifier. This is just no notation. So we have a method start, right, or a function start. And since it's an interface, we just say here. We don't need the return function here. Start. Can you see that message? Can somebody guess or tell why we have this this type or this error message? Doesn't match with what? Because we are just creating the first interface. So there is a mismatch somewhere here. Like, it's true, but what is the kind of mismatch do we have? So I don't know if it is big enough. Like, you should have, if you have written that, you should have the same error. So what it says is this interface of these methods is defaulting to any. In TypeScript or in the TSC compiler, we have some properties. We can look at the file here. And we usually prefer to say no implicit any equal true. That is, we want the compilation to fail if we don't tell what is going to be the return type or if it is going to be inferred to any. Since the method start doesn't need to do anything, if we actually tell that it's going to return void, or we could put anything, like if we wanted to return a number, that would work too. It just cannot be any. And then we can do the same with the stop method. And that's all that we need for our interface. Everybody's there? Yeah? So let's go back to the slide. So we have our file with the interface and the two methods. Now let's create a car class that implements the methods. So I give you a few minutes, like basically I'm sharing what are the properties that were earlier. We have number of wheels, should be a number. The max speed should be a number as well. Has nitrogen booster, and you can add any property you want to play with as well. And of course we need to add the functions of the methods start and stop that will be fulfilling the contract of the interface iVehicle. So I give you a couple of minutes, and let's see how it goes. If you have any question, you can ask me. And we have a few people here that also know some TypeScript that can help around. And don't worry, if you try to compile again by Ctrl-Shift-B or by command line, it will still not compile, but because this file path is in a different file, we will see the Webpack configuration in a moment, it's still going to generate this part of the code, and we will still be able to play with it. Anybody need some help? Anyone already done? We get somebody here that's using the feature of the IDE to automatically generate the template of a class. So when you implement the iVehicle, you can have the IDE that just like same as in many other languages, generate like not implemented exceptions on all the methods, and just need to add the code. But int doesn't exist, so in TypeScript we use number. The type is number, not int. That's why there is an error. Anyone already there? Already done? Yeah. In the constructor, yes. Okay, you can do that. I will. If I don't talk about it, remind me to share about that. We don't like much to do that, but I will explain why. But it is possible for a small project. So I'm going to start writing it. Class. A bit of explanation here. As expected, if we declare we implement the interface iVehicle, TypeScript is going to complain about it, right? It's going to say, hey, your class car incorrectly implement interface iVehicle. Now, if you pay attention, it's saying property start is not defined or is missing in the type car. Actually, we have two types in the interface, start and stop. But because it compiles and it breaks at a specific point, it just returns the first error into that box, that pop-up hint. But as soon as you fix the start method, you will still get an error that say, hey, you need to implement the stop one. So let's put them now as a placeholder. I can actually create that. So it's going to create it for me. And you see by default, the IDE is not creating a lambda function, because it's not the default. We shouldn't start without reason to do lambda function. So it's doing the right thing, thankfully. We said we're going to need some properties, right? So let's say private number of wheels, and this is a number. We need max speed, a number as well. So there is no difference between decimal number or integers or floats and all this variety. It's just decimal. It's just a number. It takes care of all the cases. It makes things much simpler. we said nitrogen, right? So we want a private has nitrogen booster. That's like Fast and Furious. Boolean. All right, and we need a constructor to initialize boost properties. So we use constructor, and somebody here just mentioned that there is this possibility or feature where you can declare a public variable in the constructor this way. So I'm going to remove, for example, max speed, right? And I'm going to add number of wheels as a number. And I'm going to create public max speed here as a number. And I'm going to create as nitrogen as a boolean. And we saw in the exercise in the slides earlier that I was using an optional question mark here, so we don't have to assign it. And you see TypeScript doesn't have any problem with that when we assign it. So let's have a look at these things here. I am creating a public variable in the constructor. That's basically a short notation for what we are doing with number of wheels. It creates exactly the same thing. When we transpile to JavaScript, number of wheels and max speed are going to look the same. However, when we read that code, especially when there is much more lines inside it, it gets a bit difficult to know whether there is a property max speed. We have IntelliSense, we have like some min to retrieve it, but it's not like apparent in the file. And when we work on project with a lot of developers, it's better to have explicitly the same type of information in the same format. So we don't have like to guess where is what. So that's the reason we don't use it much, but it's definitely working the same way as the other one. And it's a personal choice if you are working on your own project. That makes things shorter, and you can use it. No worries. Okay, so we have this. I had also a question during the break. Somebody was asking me about TSLint. So I already shared him the answer about it, but can somebody share their idea about, like, does TypeScript, or can we use TypeScript and TSLint at the same time? Do we need TSLint at the same time? Any idea? Does it make sense to add TSLint on top of TypeScript compiler? Sorry? Make sense? Yes. Why? TypeScript, the compiler, is going to detect syntax errors, wrong assignment, but it's not going to detect the format. And TSLint is also about the format, about the logic. So if you don't, if your tslint.config.json, I think, says you cannot have unassigned properties, or you want to have defaults everywhere, TSLint is going to capture that, and it will force you to assign values. But TypeScript doesn't care if you initialize a variable or not. So we can use a composition of both together. It works. We actually started to define the right rules that works for us at Agoda, and we are implementing it into our CI so that we get good visibility on it. But on big project, you can imagine we cannot put like all the rules in place that exist, because you get thousands or more exceptions from TSLint, and you don't know where to start. So if you are starting to introduce TypeScript and or TSLint in your project, it's maybe better to start with just a few rules, make sure that everything passes, and gradually, as you move forward, add more rules to have a really good quality of code base. So we have our variable, but I didn't assign them. One thing also we find in a lot of project or standard is to use underscore before the name of private variable. Here it's really depending on the team you are working with, your own preferences. You can define which works the best for you. It's convenient to see that it's private with an underscore before, but that's really not required as a standard notation. but we like to do that. So now I'm going to assign those properties, right? So number of wheels equal number of wheels. So interesting. Normally Control-Shift-I would do the formatting for you, but I guess I'm used of Linux. Is there a format document? Alt-Shift-F. Here we go. Max speed equal max speed. And this dot as nitrogen equal as nitrogen booster. Okay, now we need to implement this function. You can put anything you want into those functions. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. So normally F2, or where's F2 in this keyboard? This one? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. You don't have a grammar check or typo check as long as it's consistent across your application. Okay, so we get this one here, and let's put something there. Stopped. Okay, so again, if we try to compile here, so I did Control-Shift-B, I select Webpack, and it's going to show some errors. But if we look at the output from this task, yarn. Okay, then I don't have yarn on this machine. Then I'm going to just run it as a command line tool. Actually, there is something I wanted to share about Webpack. We're going to look at the configuration in a moment. npm run Webpack. And we don't have run Webpack. Am I in the right folder? So this run command comes from here. I created the script Webpack. So in theory, when we do run Webpack, we should have this the build that starts. But I was mentioning about yeah. So we have our index.txt. Let me bring back the slide where we had the screen here. Okay. So if you look at that, although you have some errors, you see on the content that has been generated, we see index.js, app.js, and the maps. So I don't want to go too much into detail about the maps, but basically when you write TypeScript that generates JavaScript, sometime when you want to debug, you want to see actually the TypeScript code you wrote. You don't want to see this like long JavaScript bundled or maybe minified code. It's not very convenient. So the map basically is the bridge between the actual JavaScript and the TypeScript. So you can use it in a browser, and when you put a breakpoint, many browsers support natively. Chrome for sure support the map. Firefox, I think the recent version also support the map. So your breakpoint will be in the TypeScript code. So it's much more convenient to debug. So what I wanted to say, when you are building here, you see the index.js is generated, and in a moment when we link our car object to the index.ts, that will be increasing the size. I think that version is actually the version it should be. Your current version might be a little bit less than 4K. And then we'll be able to execute it. So what's next? We have added our two methods. So now we want to create an instance of our car. Well, I was just talking about it. So how do we create an instance of our car? Yeah, the new keywords. So you can go to the index.ts file that is located here at the root of a source. And currently it's just connected to the variable example that I was sharing. Let me see if we can, yeah, the Webpack version would be a bit messy, but we could look at the generated code in the public folder. So here you can remove that, but you can use it as a model to include your car class inside the application. So you would change to be import car from the path to your car file. And you can see that I don't have the extension. Variables here refer to variables.ts. It's the same thing, but by practice, or actually the IDE doesn't even like it, we don't want to include it because the notation allows to add either the class file itself, so it will append automatically the extension, but it will also try to append a .js or a node module name. So that's why we don't put that extension here, to make it more flexible in case like you have things that you want to let some abstraction level. So here we add our card. Did I create card.ts? Yeah, oh, okay. So I try to put my car here. Let's remove that. And you see it's complaining. It's saying like, hey, I don't know what's your thing here. There is a S, of course, no. It's saying it's not a module. So I mentioned earlier, we will not go too much in detail about modules and namespace, but we will go only to the level where we can export and share objects across files. Because otherwise, if we don't have this functionality, you end up with TypeScript files that are like thousands of lines long and unmaintainable. So we need to make the car file available. Let's step back a little bit about modules and namespace and give some high-level definition about them. Module and namespace, basically, they are very similar, but they are used in different contexts. A namespace is for internal use, and this is the recommended way from a TypeScript community. When you create a namespace, it's internal to your application within your application. When you want to create libraries, you would export them in a module fashion. You would use the module and share them, and people would import them as a module. But here for facility, we are going just to use no namespace, no module, but it will actually transparently go to the default namespace. And each file has its own default namespace, so even though you're not creating them, you can't just put together the two files, and that's why you have this error here. So, I'm not sure you have seen from the slides I was showing earlier, I was exporting my classes and my interface before. So, to make them available outside of the namespace, because this file is in its own namespace, I'm going to export them. Here, okay, I have only one class, so let's just do that. I'm exporting so that in another file, I can import it. So we're almost there. You see, we get another error now. And if you are trying it, you will see the hint about the reason why it cannot import it. What is it? Anyone can guess what is the actual issue? We're importing the file car. What do we have in the file car? We have. That's what the hint tells. But why do we need a default module? What did we export? What did I just export in the car file? Yeah. I've exported an interface, iVehicle, and I have exported a car class. And although I'm giving the name car, that I want to get the car object from the file course/car, TypeScript actually doesn't know what is the relationship. It's just a name, it's just a reference. It doesn't know that this car means actually I want that specific car class and not the iVehicle interface. So if we don't have default, what we do, we add curly brackets here. So now I'm saying I want that car object from the file car.ts. Oops, here we go. Okay, so now that should work to import it. And if we wanted to also import our interface, we will do that later. We could add here I also want my iVehicle interface. And to illustrate the fact that this name car here doesn't matter or doesn't necessarily relate to the car name of the class, we will see we can actually rename car here and create a new instance of whatever. Not in the curly brackets, but in if we use it with a default value. And let's have a look at what is a default export. Here, I'm back to the error. I'm gonna say, okay, I want this class here to be the default class or the default object I'm going to export. So that if you want to put some more content, but you will always use that one, then you can use that notation, and now it's working. But I can name it the way I want. See? TypeScript doesn't know what's the meaning of that. And actually, oh yeah, I need to pass the argument. So it does also IntelliSense that complete and ask what we want. Okay, number of wheels, I want 4. Max speed, 100 km per hour. And since as nitrogen booster is optional, you see, I don't have to provide it. And then I can do car.start. And it should run the function start. So now, since apparently I don't have the, oh, okay, that's a PowerShell, that's interesting. That's why I didn't play with that PowerShell version in Visual Studio. If you want to run this code, like it's already available, let's go to and see why we can run this code. First, in our Webpack, we are creating two different applications, two different paths to compile or transpile our TypeScript. One is going to search for app.ts.js or an app module, and same, it's going to look for index.ts, index.js. Actually, it's going to look at those extensions here. We'll go through the Webpack file in more detail in a moment. I just want to have you be able to run this code, and then we can go back to this file. So it's going to create two things, and because the index path is actually compiling properly, we will be able to generate our outcome. Now, since I cannot compile, I won't be able to see the execution, but you should be able to get that. So now, this index file, when you do Control-Shift-B, you should be able to execute it and to find inside the public folder /js an index.js. So when you compile, do you get this file? Yeah? Control-Shift-B or npm space run space Webpack. Is the file generated? So since we are in a node environment, what you can do is type from the, well, any folder. For me, again, it's not going to work, but the syntax will be the same. If you don't have a terminal available here, you can use Control and the backtick character, which is below the escape key, and it will create a terminal. Here I'm removing it, here I'm creating it. And now what you can do is in this terminal node and the path of your index file. So since I don't have it, I can't find it, but you would run that and it should execute your run, your start method. Anyone able to go there? Is anybody able to run using Control-Shift-B? No? Okay. Does it work when you do npm or yarn space runs space Webpack? Okay. So here, yeah, so index.js should have been produced here, and you can run it by calling node. Yeah? Anyone having compilation errors? Maybe I can help? Anyone not there yet? Raise your hand. Yeah, need a few minutes? Let's take a few more minutes. No? Okay. So, okay. Supply parameter do not switch. Okay, can you go to your carve objects here? So you export default. Yeah, so it's not car. You need to use the keyword constructor, not the name of the class. Not minus run. Just yeah. Okay.
This is the error I pulled.
Yeah, that's fine. We're gonna fix that in the next exercise. So it's still gonna fail to compile. You'll still get some errors with a class name error handler, and that's okay. Like we have two different paths of applications. We have two applications bundled here. The one with index is working fine once you write the proper code, and the app version, we're gonna fix it in a moment. Sorry. Anyone else? Like we need to be able to pass this point, otherwise it might be a bit more complex at the next stage. So if you still have problem, we can like, yeah. This file should already exist. Or did you create a new project? Oh, okay. So you need a bit more. So if you want to go through creating from scratch this project, in case you don't have access to GitHub, yeah, you would need to have all of this inside. At the top here, let me maybe. If you go to the HTTP URL that I shared earlier, do you have a URL still? Okay, I can bring it back because you can browse it on Chrome or any browser, and you can search for the files, so you can copy paste. Okay, thanks. Are we good? We can move to the next next bit. So we have created our interface, our car. We make it run. Everybody can make it run. Let's convert or create the as nitrogen booster property. So here, this is, yeah, over there, as nitrogen booster. Let's create a getter and a setter. So if you recall the notation, we have a get or set keyword. We can assign a parameter to a getter, and we can only return a property in the in a setter, and you can only return a value or a property in a getter. So I'm not going to show you yet the screen. I'll let you start to go through it, to maybe meet some issues or some problems, so that we can fix them and understand why we are meeting those issues. Yes? Okay. Did you modify it, or is it the original one? Yeah, so that should... Okay, so that is okay. Like this error, this is the one we will address in the other application folder. But if you scroll up in this, yeah, you see index.js was produced, so it should work. Now in the terminal, in public JS, and yeah, index.js. So that you can see the code that actually generates. It's much more complex than the few lines of class that we have created. Anyone having problems with the getter or setter? Or do you have it already? Are we there? Let's go to the code. So here, if we want to add, let's start with a getter. So I want to get the as nitrogen booster. By convention, or again, it's by choice, depending on what notation you prefer, we use capital letter for the first letter of a property, so we can distinguish with a regular property. This is a getter, so we cannot pass any argument, but we return the type of Boolean. And we are going to return this dot has nitrogen booster. That's as simple as that. Now what we like to do for this nitrogen booster is to give it a purpose. And in the previous example during the slide, what I was doing is basically, if we have a nitrogen booster, we're going to add something to the max speed. So here we give the same name as nitrogen booster, and here I pass a value, so let's call it just value. It's not a keyword here. And I'm going to say if the value, then, well, that's not helpful, right? The value, let's be, okay. If we have a booster, what we do is this dot max speed plus equal 50. Control Alt F, okay. But also we need to assign to it, right? Otherwise that value would be lost. And that's it. Now if we want to use it in our constructor, we're going to change to set here the value. And you see, it's just like, it looks like a property from the outside world. If we were to use does this car has booster, and we could do this dot has nitrogen booster, and that's using the property here. So we could imagine some business logic we would put in the getter eventually, a bit of something to customize it. So we wouldn't use the pure variable member. And here you can compile it and run it, and it should be updated along the changes you have applied. Everybody has their setter and getter? Need a few more minutes? We good? All right. So let's create an instance of a supercar. Sorry, I'm jumping a little too fast. Let's create a new class, supercar or boost car, or whichever name you want to give it, right? That extends a car. So we are not going to implement the interface iVehicle directly. We're going to extend the car, which indirectly implements iVehicle. So can you create in the same car.ts file supercar class or your great car class? And we're saying here that we want it to default to have the nitrogen booster from the parent class. If you're familiar with this concept in other languages, we use the keyword super, right, to call the parent class methods or constructor. So this is what you're going to have to use it to be actually utilizing the feature or the proper way instead of reassigning all the properties. So we create a class. I'm going to export it directly because I would want to use it. export class supercar that extends car. And here, because I am in the same namespace, I don't need to import it yet again. I can use it directly. And I coding the constructor. I'm going to say, actually we can share the constructor members here, right? And because we say we want to default to nitrogen, I'm not going to ask for the property nitrogen in the constructor. I'm going to set it. So I say I want to call my superclass constructor and pass number of wheels, pass max speed from this constructor, and default to this value. Like it's very close to what we have in like other language like C#, Java, and other object-oriented. This should be enough to inherit for all those properties as long as they are public. Inside here, when you pass it to the superclass, you lose the access of this property directly because it's private, but you still have the getter and the setter available to customize or to use it into your code inside that class. So it's really the same inheritance rules that are applied, same inheritance rules that apply here in TypeScript. So now when you compile, you will see, I'd like to ask you to open the index.js after you have compiled this thing. Actually, you might want to also instantiate it into your index like the same way. But when you compile and you look at the index.js, you should be able to see that there is no interface iVehicle. This is what I was mentioning earlier. This is purely a development tool or a development feature. We don't need to export it. Now, how are you going to import your new class? Because we have a default, but we cannot have two defaults. Did you import it already? I actually kind of showed earlier how to do that. Yeah, exactly. And even if we have a default, we can still have the brackets, but be careful with the naming. So the best way to do that is actually to keep it separately. And I would have here my supercar. And you see, because it finds it from the export, it's just directly available. Supercar. Supercar. And I'm going to say 4 wheels as well, and the same initial speed, right? But because it defaults to set the booster, if we look at the setter here, we're gonna add 50 kilometer per hour at this at the speed. So now if we do supercar dot start, it should show the nitrogen property, or if you display the max speed, it would show the max speed here. This car starting at max speed. Okay, so if you run that, you should be able to see one shows at 100 km per hour, the other one at 150. Do you get this output in the console? Anyone having trouble? Like before, because it's gonna start to be a little bit more and more of this with different application, with a web application in a moment, with some HTML code. So if we are still a bit on identifying how to write it, let's close it. You good? Yeah. Don't be afraid. We are not so many today, so we have time to spend the right amount of time to actually identify how to. So here the. Okay. Yeah. So here you need to pass the property nitrogen. right? Because in your superconstructor you have a nitrogen, so you need to pass a Boolean value, true or false. Yeah, after the 2 you can put a comma and then, no, in the super line, after 2, comma, after the 2. Yeah. Like, sorry. In this one here, comma, and then true or false. True. Yeah. T-R-U. Yeah, this one. Okay. And then same for this one. True or false, depending on the value you want to put. Okay. Yes. Okay, so you have exported car, okay. Yeah, so you can see the method here. So if we look at the constructor in car, yes, here, you see? You didn't pass it as parameter, you assign it with an equal sign. So you need to do has equal false. Are we there? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Let me go this way. Does it work? Yeah? Okay, cool. So, for the next one, we are going to fix finally those errors at compilation. Let me bring back these slides here. So we make it start and stop. Here, as I was saying, we can make it run by doing node public. There, for the next exercise, we are going to make it work by fixing the code. I need to bring this one just to have a proper notation. So let's have a look at the errors reported by the compiler. Then I need to go back to here. So it's saying in the class validator here, it cannot find the name error handler, which is kind of the error we used to have when we didn't export our car class, right? So now we should be able to address that. So we need to find the validator, which is in the component lib validator here. And if you scroll down, you will see that error is actually reported already in the browser. So it cannot find the object error handler. Now we haven't imported any error handler. We don't have any class error handler. But there is a file here called errorhandler.d.ts. What does that extension means? It's basically, it's for definition. A definition file is what I was mentioning earlier with jQuery when we want to import a third-party library. This is the way we would do that. We would need to have the JavaScript version of that library. And what we do is we use ambient declaration by saying, okay, I am declaring a class error handler, and it has those properties. It looks really similar to a simple interface, right? But we usually use this notation to represent the type of object it is. But I'm saying, okay, I'm going to need an error handler class coming from a third-party library. Now, to be able to do that, you actually need the JavaScript of that library, because it's not going to generate the code for you. If we look at the index.html in this folder, I have added at the bottom JavaScript event handler.js, but it doesn't exist. It's just to illustrate how we would use it in such import of third-party library, but the scope of this workshop is not to play too much about that. It's just that so you are aware of the way we can add into our HTML page the third-party JavaScript and how we can use it and not export it, but declare it to our application. And now that I have this, the error disappears here because actually it will, I don't think it will compile, and at best if it compiles it will say it doesn't know where to find the error handler because we don't have implementation. But the notation you would do to, if you have namespace in particular, you would reference to that DTS file with a / notation, and you would say, okay, I want a reference with a path, and you give the path of this file, which is just error handler, and you can also use the short notation for it. You don't need error handler. Okay. Oh, no, you need the full notation, pardon me. So now this way, you actually declare that this is where TypeScript can find the format of that third-party library. And with that, you see, we don't need the JavaScript file. We can build our application, let that third-party library do their thing until you go actually at runtime where you need the JavaScript file. So again, it is not included here. This is for example, how to use it. What we are going to do is simply using a class, error handler, which is in that file. So I share actually the code for you, and I will let you modify, remove what is not needed, and modify it so that we can import that class for the validator file to compile properly. So to bring some motivations, I have here 2 pop-up head, and the first person that submit the proper code that make it works can choose from these 2. We have a Walking Dead and Game of Thrones. So call me when you're ready, and we can review the code. I'm thinking I should exclude from this game Agoda people, right? No, that's open to everyone. So raise your hand when you are ready, and when you can actually run, like compile it, and we're gonna try to execute the HTML page. For me, I'm basically done on the work. The rest of the workshop is going to be you creating some code, like utilizing what we have seen today, and applying to first this web page. It's a very simple form that validates the field, and then we have a game, a TypeScript game, small platform game. It's very small, but to see to which level we can actually use TypeScript in many contexts, not just for web. Anyone there yet? I can provide some help if you need to unlock some compilation issues or some notations. Like, if you need any help. Like, do you know what you need to achieve? Because that might be a better question too. So it compiles, okay, but does it actually... Well, okay, so what I meant by making it work is actually to utilize this code that is commented. So if we, whoops, I think I moved the webcam. Maybe not so much. Okay, so what we want to do is to actually use this code here and not use the definition, because when at runtime, if we don't have the actual JavaScript code, it will just fail. It will return an error. So the first step is to actually use a regular class, the same way we created the car class or the supercar class. But you see, we get some errors, some weird things that happens, and you can either Google the answer, you can ask me, I can share some information. Yes. Winner? Yeah? Okay, so, looking good. So for that one, that compiles. And then if you look at the app.ts or the validator.ts, yeah, okay. All right, yep. So let's run this application. What you can do, well, it compiles. Now, if you want to execute it, we are going to use the HTTP server from a node. What you can run is, how do we, Control F5, and the VS Code launch should be working fine. No process error, spawn yarn. On a Mac, it should be Control F5 to run it. Otherwise, in the command line terminal, you can stop this one here. And from the terminal, you can type .node modules, /node modules /bin yeah, /http-server. I'm going to type it to show. And then, well, let's see if it actually works. Yeah. You already ran it. Did you run it before, or did it open it? Yeah. Okay. Then this is one winner. Anyone else? Yeah. So did you open the web page, and does it pass validation if you click submit? I think, can you show the console? I think something is probably F12, if it is Chrome. Yeah, let me see, server responded, yeah, almost there. If you try to submit this one, yeah, so that's, and if you click into, okay, so this one is a confirm. Anyone else? No? There's one gift for this this exercise that is earned here, and let's see after the workshop or in a minute to choose which one do you prefer, Game of Thrones or Walking Dead? Do you know The Walking Dead? Do you know Game of Thrones? Everybody knows Game of Thrones, right? Yeah, Game of Thrones season, what, 7? Just started, right? Okay, well, congratulations. And we have another one for the game, the TypeScript game after. Anybody needs some help? Like now I can give any help that you need because we already have a winner. So if you want to complete, I can share anything. Yeah. So, okay, so that kind of errors is like something is wrong in the environment. It's not just TypeScript error, like it cannot execute some part of it. Again, on Mac, I'm not entirely familiar with the environment, so I'm not sure if you scroll up. So it generates the code. No, it still cannot find the handler. So you still have problem. There is more to fix. What time is it? Yeah, we still have a few minutes, and then we'll move to the game. So I'm pretty sure that many of you are very close to it, but there is a little trick. So the first one here is that it's saying, hey, you cannot have initializer in an ambient context. I have used the keyword ambient to share how we are importing third-party library via ambient declaration by using this declare class instead of simply exporting the class. The thing is that TypeScript knows that this is a .d.ts file. So it says, hey, you cannot put a real implementation inside a d.ts. So to illustrate a little bit that, we could make the analogy with a header file in C language. When you have your .h file that declares what are the methods, that's a little bit what means a .d.ts. So you don't want to put implementation. So what we do first, we rename this file. Where is my F2? Yeah, to be only handler, and magic, just works, right? So that's the first thing we need to address to fix these bits. And then the same way we have imported the car into our previous code, we need to import our error handler. So did I put it as default? Not default, but there is only one. So that's an easy choice. And we add import curly, we don't need the curly brackets, right? Error handler. And there, we should have proper compilation. We should have no error here. It should know when I control click. Actually, even the highlight shows what is a bit the content of that class. We see where we find the error handler. Now, on that Windows machine, I didn't set up properly the things, so I cannot do just Control F5 to run the default configuration. If you're not familiar with VS Code, the Control Shift B and the Control F5 are handled by these two files. So the task.json tells we are going to run the command yarn, or you can replace it by npn if you don't have it on your machine. If you don't have a yarn, we want to show the output, it's up to you. We need to make it a shell command, and I pass the argument run, and the second argument webpack. So this is to link to the command line version when it's going to run yarn or npm space run space webpack. Now, I'm adding this is build command equal true, so that this line allows to connect this command to the Control Shift B. In Visual Studio, Control Shift D means build, and this is how we make that connection to that particular command. There is also Control Shift T in some environment, but on Linux it didn't work. I haven't tried here on Windows, where the Control Shift T is already assigned to another function. But you could do the same if you had a test script into your webpack config or package.config, and it would run the test automatically from there. So that is for the Control Shift B. In the launch configuration, we are going to run HTTP server from the node module. So what we say here, we are going to run from this workspace folder, yarn space run space HTTP server. So that would require, however, to have, let me see if I pushed the change. If it doesn't work, you might want to add in package.json the HTTP server here, and then add the command HTTP server. It might work on your environment depending on how it is set up. HTTP. So when you run this, let me try. No. So again, again, my environment is not good, but on some machine it was working. It runs the simple HTTP server, and it shows in the terminal the, let me see, debug. No, it doesn't. It didn't run. It will show you a URL that says basically localhost colon 8080, where you can open the HTTP server on a browser, or the IP address colon 8080 with the slash to open it. And it might work also on 127.0.0.1. So if you want to run it from command line, okay, keyboard is sensitive, don't worry. Run HTTP server. No, I think this environment I need to, it's not gonna work. Is anyone able, other than our lucky winner, to run the web page? Yeah? Okay, like this one is important to be able to run, because for the next piece of workshop for the game, it is a TypeScript game inside a browser, so it would be easier to have it working. Now I actually need to connect that to make it work, because oh, I think I know what's happening. I might not have done the install, and that's why maybe it doesn't find. Like I mentioned, we needed to initialize, but yeah, so let's let it run. In the meantime, if you are ready to go to the next workshop, we are going to download another let's use this one as template. So you will need to clone another HTTP, another Git project. Here the name is Agoda TypeScript initiation. You just replace initiation by game. So it's Agoda-TypeScript-game, and you can clone that repository already. Okay. Let's see. Still not. Yeah, maybe an old version of npm on this machine. So what I'm gonna do is clone here TypeScript, Agoda TypeScript game. Agoda TypeScript game, and then I'm gonna start another instance of Visual Studio. So I'm going to go a little bit into the detail of this project. This is a TypeScript game, so unfortunately I don't think I pushed the compiled version, so we won't see how it looks. Okay, so this is the breakdown of this application. This game is using phaser.io library, which is a TypeScript or a JavaScript engine to create games. So if you browse the website, phaser.io, I think, you can see some sample of what it can do. It's pretty cool. And I use part of their game to inspire to this Agoda game. The structure is this way. So we have a source folder in the same way as we had our previous workshop. And inside I'm breaking two specific components. So I have an engine folder that contains basically the high-level structure of a game. You don't need to learn phaser in 2 minutes or in the next 5 minutes. All the code is already there. We just need to patch here and there to make it compile. I think this one should compile. If you try to compile it, it should have no errors, right? Maybe I can give you a few minutes to download it. Can you access it? Can you get the repo? Yeah? And then when you open Visual Studio Code on that folder, does it build? No? Good. So let's fix it. I don't recall which things I didn't include. Agoda Splash. Okay. So on that folder, we have the engine part that is basically the high-level structure that is completely, like mostly interfaces and controlling classes for the game. And we have the Agoda folder that is the specific implementation of the game. So basically the engine is some form of wrapper or layer between the phaser library to make it a little bit easier to use. So the kind of files that we have, the engine is the main controller for the game, along with the game class that control the elements going in and out. And then the other properties, the other interface that start with I. We like to have some notation to identify easily from the file name whether it contains interface or class. And you will see that everything is broken down into its own file. There is, I think, no file with more than one class or one interface into this. Sometimes you can group interfaces into one file when they are linked together with a specific business logic or business purpose. You would create maybe even a module or a namespace for it, so you keep them contained into a logical environment. But for the purpose of a simple game, I just keep them separate. Then we have the Agoda game that calls the main functionality, and the Agoda platform, which is an implementation of part of a UI. So here we see in the Agoda game, which is kind of the entry point, we have all the imports, and you see with the curly brackets, I didn't use any defaults because for the notations here, and we see jQuery here is missing. So you are going to have to do yarn or npm install to download the node modules. So this is number 2 here. Let's find number 1. That's number 4. It is in dude. Oh, I got a splash maybe. Yeah. Okay. So once you have done the install of the node dependency and you go to Agoda Splash, which is actually the first one that is logged into the compilation error, is basically it's missing a getter or setter from the interface iSplash. So let's have a look at the interface here. What it's saying is the iSplash interface requires a setGame methods that returns void and receive a phaser game, and it has a property display. So in an interface, this is how you declare that you're going to have a getter or a setter. Eventually that could be a property that have an uppercase, but for notation we recognize that if a property in an interface have a capital letter, we use it to notify that's going to be a getter and a setter. So here we're going to have a display that has that is get set member with a type boolean. If you go to the Agoda Splash located in the source components Agoda animated and then Agoda Splash, you will see at line 16 that it is saying, hey, we need to create the display getter and setter. So let's go there and implement. So it's very similar to what we did in the car. It's just a bigger project, a bigger place of code. Set display. And we're going to pass display as a boolean. And here we already have this .display. So I'm just assigning the property. Now the setter is done. We still need the getter. get display that returns boolean, and it just for this exercise we don't need anything special here, so I'm just returning it. So don't worry about the IntelliSense errors that I got here, is because I can't get the npm packages, the node modules, so for me it still shows some errors, but you should be able to get that fine on your machine. Once you have this done, does it compile now, or do we still need to fix something? Just to make sure that we have HTTP server, yeah. Does it compile? Yeah. So the game is launched in the same way that we just did with the form validation. So if you run HTTP server, so node yarn or npm run HTTP server, or if you're lucky, the Visual Studio Code can run on a Control F5, you should be able to browse on the localhost IP address on port 8080 as well. You might want to stop the other project because you cannot bind on the same port on two different places. So, so normally HTTP server is going to need to be run from the folder above public, because it's going to look for the public folder by default. So if you are not on that layer, you will be served like a page index. Yeah, we got somebody here that can have the page already, the game running. Yeah, we still need to do some fix. The game is not functional, but at least we get something going. Oh, did you fix more? So we have one person here that can run the game. 2? Yeah, 3? Okay. But you can see that for whoever can run the game, it looks like broken, right? It's not fully functional. The score is not updated. It might be, okay, the direction is working. If you press up, it will jump. But the score is not updated. And once you get all the stars, well, nothing happens. So we're going to need to continue fixing the code. And yes?
Sorry, so if I run HTTP server, I'm keeping a missing scripts.
Okay.
Put HTTP servers at both the dependency and installed globally.
Okay, and then you're running it from this folder?
Correct. Just above the public. So I'm running it basically from the root.
Yeah. Well, that should be fine.
But I do get this, so it compiles correctly.
And it doesn't find this. Yeah. Okay. Then browse to public.
Yeah. Start the server again, but like if I run Webpack Dev
Oh,
server,
this one. If you use the Webpack Dev server, you might need to be inside the folder from where you need to find the index.html. So you might need to browse through public folder. Yeah.
okay.
Like by default, there is in the package HTTP server.
There it is. Okay, got it.
Do we get the game? Yeah, we get it here too.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Are you sorry, are you able to get it? Okay. So there's still something missing that we need to implement. Okay, so we still have a bit of time, so we can move forward. So if you look through the code in the Agoda place, in Engine I think everything is already properly implemented, but if you look through the classes in Agoda Splash, Dude, Stars, Agoda Game, Agoda Platform, you will see some sharp symbol with a number. So we already solved sharp 1 for the display. Actually, if you didn't have that, we don't satisfy the interface, so that's why it failed to compile. But now we are missing features, like the score, the end of a game. So search for this sharp 1, sharp 2, sharp 3. I'm going to drive you through those. Some examples. So the dude is fine. The star is fine. In Agoda Game, we have the 2 here. So the reset of a game, which is basically called when we start, clean up the game, or when we restart. Like when we finish the game, you can restart by pressing space. So we need to implement some updates here. We need to reset the score to 0, and we need to set the number of stars to the initial numbers. So when you start the game, there is a certain amount of stars. You can set it to any number, or you can use the static member here. Oh, that's not 12, that's 10 actually that we put. You can reuse this number to say how many stars you want in the game. Like if you put too many, it's gonna look like a bit ugly. I think between 10 to 12, it looks like kind of okay. So let's set the reset logic for the score and for the number of stars. So we can see some example of how the code use the stars, right? In the line 61 and 64, it shows star remaining and decrementing that count. It's increasing the score, but that's weird. The score is not updated on the page, right? And then star remaining, if it is 0, we kill the game. And whoever can fix the score will need to share with everyone why it's working just by resetting it in that reset method. And I think I've seen it working here, right? Sorry, what is your name? Hello. Seems like it's working, right, for you? No? Over there, I think it's working in front. All right, so we got another winner here. Anybody else is able to close the game, like to be able to completely start and reach the game over? We get not a number here. That's better. Other people are still at undefined. Do you still need more time, or do you want to go to the next, the last 2 items? I think there are 2 more, -3 and -4. Let's implement this one here. So we need to set the score, right? That's the easy bit. And when we do that, it's stop to show undefined in the game, right? When you play, it shows 0 because we have set it. So then in the execution of the collision between the stars and the character, when we want to score, basically to grab that star, the incrementation logic is working, because now the type is no longer undefined, because undefined plus 10 is still undefined. And 0 plus 10, then we can increment correctly the score. And the other part we need in the reset is we want to be able to start again the game with all the stars, because if we just do this, once you win, you get all the stars, it goes to the game over screen, it says, okay, you can press space to play again, but there's no star, right? So what we're gonna do, we just reinitialize the number of stars to star remaining equal Agoda game dot number of stars. So now we are able to play and to go back and forth into the gameplay. Now, if I push the proper version, yeah, we have two index files. The first one is the one that we are using by default, like when you open the browser, it goes to index.html. But if you type index2.html, you will see that there is an option here to select the character, dude or dudette. Yeah, that's not so original, but that is the charm to be simple. So here, the goal is to be able to select this option and actually change the character we're going to use to play the game. Currently, there is no callback or no connection between the game and the character. So currently, it just default to dude, which going to use the character that you see currently when you play the game. We have added a reference to jQuery. So you should be able to add the logic at this level to capture the value of the option and then set it to the return value. To return actually the dynamic value selected here, you see that the value is dude or dudette. So you just have to replace that and you will be able to dynamically launch the version of a game that you want. Anyone there? Like basically you should be able to use a selector. So you can actually go like row and do document.getElement by ID, or you can use a jQuery selector. Yeah. Okay. So what do you have in the reset method? Yeah. I think there's something else that might have been changed. Or can you go to the display, to the your getter and setter in Agoda game? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So this one. Okay. Anybody else has not a number instead of a score? Can you go back to Agoda game? To this one? And at the top is the type. The score equals 0. If you scroll up, the type is number. Okay. No, I mean that would work only the first time you load the page. When you play again, it would not work. And if you scroll down to the collide method, continue down. Yeah, here, the score plus 10.
Maybe that's not called this function. Or shall we call?
Well, it does call it. Like we have. Not sure. Maybe something deleted by accident, or can you save? Actually, it's not save. And then compile. Did you compile? Oh, okay, it's yes, watching, yeah. Okay, so you might want to clear your cache because when you run in the browser, it might require to, like if it looks like your update is not applied, two things you need to check. One, did you actually compile? But by default, I think I preset Webpack to watch. So when it's watching, anytime you save a TypeScript file, it will automatically pick up the change and generate the JavaScript, recompile it. And the second thing, clear your cache, because once it's loaded, like the phaser library, here we go. It's also possibly caching the things. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, yeah. Okay, so that is for the implementation of the get user. Anyone already there able to choose the character? I think there's an item number 4. Maybe in the Agoda platform? Yes, here we go. So this one is a little bit more tricky, and I don't have anything planned after that, so I'm happy to stay. Like I think the timing we have is only from 1 to 4, kind of, but I'll be here for a while. Sorry? Yeah, because item number 4 is to get that second prize. And you see that right now in this code, we kind of hard-coded the addition of the platforms. So if we go quickly to the logic, what it says is basically we create here, actually simplified there, 2 platforms, and the position is given in the beginning of the method's name. So when we create at the position 400, 400, that's going to create the first platform that is at the right-hand side of the game. And the second one here is going to be located like a bit on the left, like only half of it is displayed because we go to a negative position. And that's how those platforms are created. But it's very static, like the way that the game logic runs, it always goes to the create and then it keeps updating following the update logic. Here for the platform, because they are static, like they're just platform and they don't move, there's nothing in the update. So we want to be able to add dynamically those platforms and maybe to place them into a different place, maybe to have more platform, and to see how this framework is going to automatically understand that it's going to support the stars going to fall on the platform along the place that you put it. So once you have sorted out the character, which is in the Agoda game here, you can move on to the Agoda platform file and try to implement a logic when we add platform dynamically and find the places where we can create the call that method for adding it before the game starts. In gaming frameworks, like there's always a very strict workflow of the creation of the items and the updates of the item. So you need to create them at the right place. You need to call that method at the right place before the game starts. And whoever can add dynamically from calling the add platform methods, tree platform, or move them around, get the Walking Dead figurine. Is it? Yeah, but the last one is Walking Dead. Yes.
How do you run this?
So
what I found out is that
yes, so actually that was already from what I provided, right?
right.
So normally to run VS Code, but on Mac I'm not sure what is the shortcut, but it should be Control F5, because just F5 is to debug, but with HTTP server, which is another process, you can't debug HTTP server directly. You need to add a bit of logic to do that. But here, that the equivalent of Mac of Control F5, so it's either Command F5 or, oh yeah.
But what I found out, if I run the HTTP server, it doesn't pick up my change. But if I go to the index HTML directly, it does. Not sure what's there.
And you clear your browser.
I can try. Like, you mean delete
The browser cache. Like that was we had one trouble with another developer over there. Yeah, it might be that. And the compilation, the transpilation is in watch mode, right? It's keep compiling.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody there? Like at least to be able to choose the character. Like to change the character, you could cheat and go to the do.ts and just change the get character to return do that, right? That would be, but still that would be hard-coded if we want to dynamically be able to choose it. You will need to run the index2.html to have the option, the select option on the page. Anybody need help? So while you're trying to do that, I'm gonna try to use the TypeScript compiler and hopefully get something. PowerShell. Let's go there. TypeScript game, okay. Oh, that's a very old version of Nodes. 0.12. Like we are at 8 something now, or like the LTS version is 6. So that could explain a lot. So if I go to C, program, files, Node.js, Node. Here, okay, we get the right version here. And possibly npm, yeah. Let me know if you have already the item 3 working, or if you need some help, and if you have already the number 4 working as well. Okay, then npm run webpack. Okay, well, finally, I think I could get to compile the application by finding the path to the update, so should be able at least to get some demo here. Not fully doomed after all. And you see, I think I've added the tslint into, yeah. So there is a tslint file added, but with a basic ruling, like nothing extensive. And when we build with Webpack, it's actually reporting that we have a few lines of code that is not very well formatted. We can eventually change the semicolon or the proper syntax. Wait that the compilation completes, and we should be able to run the browser. Anyone else want to ask any question? Is there anything that I can help to make it run? Anyone there already? Yes, sure. Okay, so look, get character value. So select character. So the logic, yeah, that logic is correct. However, that's true. We need to bind the event of the start button, of a click of a button. So I don't think I've added that code. So since the event management is used by the add event listener, you can find in the index, in the Agoda game. Yes, in the game. Do we have any binding of the button? I don't recall if I remove that or not. So it is removed. That's good. Let's go to the app.ts, which is at the root. Oh, index.ts, sorry. It's below. Yeah, here. And I think here we should have item, content. If you scroll up, yes, here start game, Windows unknown start game. We need to change that to be bound to the click of a button, because otherwise it's already load and it already pre-selects dude, and even if you change, it cannot reset it. Okay, so let's see if I can run HTTP server. Missing script. Okay, doesn't matter. Let's run it directly. So in case you have trouble starting HTTP server, you can go from the root of the application above a node module and run it directly from node modules /bin/HTTP server. And it will start automatically on port 8080 and finding the content of public folder. I need to allow access. Okay, and now if I open a browser, localhost, still recording. Okay, on port 8080. Here we go. So if you don't have this and you need any help, you can either ask your colleague, or I can also help. Anybody is able at least to get the game displayed, rendered, and able to control the character? Does anyone cannot see that screen? Okay, yeah.
So I'm running into a problem where I can't get JS not found? Because it points to a JS directory, but the
App.js, it should be looking for index.js. Can you look at the Webpack file?
yeah, when I go to the public,
No, in webpack.config, if you open that file. Because this is the... Okay, so it's gonna look for app. Okay, so it's gonna generate...
JS,
Yes.
but I don't have that folder, so it should.
Oh, it will create it, yes. It will create it from the place that you run Webpack, or the command that you run. So it should create the folder.
Okay. But
Did it
doesn't
create? Okay, maybe there is permission things on Mac. So you can create a JS folder under the public folder. The public folder should exist. It should be coming from GitHub. And you can try to create a JS folder eventually, and that might be because of permission. Okay.
So I can execute.
Yeah. Okay. So, but you have 2 times the start. So, okay, you want it to start by default, and then with a default character. Okay. Character name. That works too, but then the method getCharacter is not used, right? But that works too. Like, and well, it might work when you run. Does it actually allow you to refresh the character? Change to that and start. All right. So yeah, the code is correct. It's not using the at the place that it was designed, but that works fine. So that means you get the second character. We have twice the same winner. Did somebody didn't raise their hand before and was already working? Yeah? Oh, add mod platform. Oh yes, that's right. We need the platform, which is not done. So in the Agoda platform, yeah, basically we need to modify the code so that we can, from the creation of a game, create more platform dynamically instead of having hard-coded 2 platform at that position. And I think we have somebody here that have this. Okay, so where did you create the platforms? Okay. Okay. So, in a real context of a game, would you put this boost for lines to create the platform inside the constructor, or is there some other place that would be more logical to actually control the game? We need to generate the platform of the creation of a game, which is correct in the concept that you have here. The problem in terms of design, you are putting the logic that decide how many platform we put inside the platform object. So it's not so flexible, right? We want to have a bit more control over it. So the method is by default public. When we don't have modifier, the method is public. So you should be able to access it from outside, from the engine of a game or the controller of a game, basically. But you're very, very close. Anyone else is almost getting the other character and the platform? Are you able to get the other character working too? Like to choose the dude or do that? No? Okay. So we need all of it to be implemented, right? We need to be able to dynamically select the character. We need to have the possibility to add more platforms from basically the outside of the platform class, because otherwise it's kind of put together the logic and the controller. We want to have the control of what the game should look like from the outside. And so yeah, these two, because we have a setter and the score. I think everybody is already up to speed. Is everything okay?
Yeah, but I'm lost.
Oh, okay. So we have two types of people that are close to wins. One person that is already able to control the platform and very close to make it dynamic. And a few others are able to change the characters. Anyone already reached the full version?